So, my wife and I have adopted three children in the foster care system. We're going to talk about some of the misconceptions about adopting foster care children. The first one I want to talk about is it easy? What do you have to say about that?
It's not easy. Um, it's not easy having children come in and out of your home. It's not easy living like you don't know when they're going to leave, if they're going to leave. Um, it's just too many unknowns where you're always anxious and wondering like when the other shoe's going to drop.
So, we had children in our home before we had our first foster child that we adopted. Some came and left. Now, why was that when later on we would adopt three children? Why didn't that happen at the beginning?
Because the earlier that you get a child in your home that like in their situation, like say that the first group of kids that we had, they were removed from a car, from their from their family, from a car. um they Once they go to their first hearing with the judge will say whether this is a case that the children should remain in foster care or if they shouldn't. In that case, the judge felt that because they were um it moving around, I guess, and they, I guess, found family or whatever to stay with, they felt that it was okay to return them to their mother, even though their father wasn't able to, take them. But the judge gave, rights or custody back to the mother. So that's why they were only like 2 weeks and back. The other child that we had, she was in the system a little bit longer. She was in the system, I believe it was like 6 to 8 months. But her parents were, well, her mother was actively trying to get her back. And even though she wasn't doing all the things that she was supposed to do, they found that the judge was okay with giving custody to the mom's boyfriend. So there are some ways of like going around things, I guess, if you get the right judge that will agree to it. And that's what happened in that case.
So, did we are there different parts of the foster care system? Is there an adoption part and then one where you just take kids in for a little while? Like, is it more complicated than we thought, or than some people
There's
watching would think?
there's different units. There's a unit that removes the children from the home, finds placement for them, and then kind of it switches off to once they have their hearing. If the judge says that they're staying in with DCPMP, then, or foster care, whatever, then they move to just a regular foster care unit where they have a caseworker that watches them, follows them, that is the go between the foster parent and the parents, um sets up visits, all of that kind of stuff. Then if they get to the point where they haven't found any family that is interested in taking the child or adopting the child, or able to because of their record or whatever, um, or if also the parents aren't able to get them back, then after a certain point, they the judge deems that they can move to the adoption unit, which then you get a new signed a new caseworker. Um, Same thing as when if you have a child in your home that moves to the adoption unit and you are interested in continuing the process and adopting the child, then you get a different caseworker also, or resource worker, however you want to call it. So you kind of move into a different division, and like the main foster care unit is basically there to continue the process, to like monitor that the parents are working to, get the child back, or look for family members to take them. Also monitor, anything that the child needs, set up visits, like that kind of thing. Once you get to the adoption unit, the parents still have visits, so that part still continues. They have to monitor that part. But they get
Mm-hmm.
more into your background, and you have to do a whole they have to do a whole case study on you to present to the judge that you are able to adopt this child. They again just basically take all your information from the beginning, which was all your financial information, your background information. They get together, like where you work, how much you make,
Mm-hmm.
what you like to do in your spare time, how many people are in your family, who's your support system, like they all the questions that you were basically asked from beginning to end. It's someone's actual job to take all that information and write it up in a case study. That takes a couple of months. Once that's done and the adoption paperwork has gone, to the point of going to court, and they find that the parents are not doing what they're supposed to do, or there's no family members to take them that are able to pass background checks and all that kind of stuff, then you have a court date. And once you get to that court date, well, at any point, the parents can sign over rights. So right before you go to that court date, they will set up a mediation,
Mm-hmm.
which is between the foster parents and the bio parents. At least this is how it is in New Jersey. And the foster parents and bio parents can choose to go, can choose to not go. It's not like you have to go to this. But it is held at the courthouse, and it's with a court mediator. Um, in two of our cases, I did actual mediation. The first one, they kind of just gave up and walked away at a certain point. They realized that they weren't going to get the child back, and they didn't want to put any effort into it, so they didn't go. And I was told they weren't going to go, so I didn't go to that one. The second one
Mm-hmm.
was my first real experience of like dealing with a biological parent face to face. Like I've seen biological parents, here and there, school things and stuff like that, and different meetings and stuff, but it's like you don't really get the chance to talk to them. Where when you go to mediation, that's what you're doing. You're just sitting there talking to them, telling them about their child, how they are with you, and how you love them and how you care for them and how they're doing at school and like their whole life, because they really don't know the ins and outs of their child. They only get to see them if they go to visits, and visits are only like once a week, maybe for an hour. So you're really not getting to know your child in that way. Um, so that meeting, I had a big problem where it was with the biological dad. Biological mom did not show up. And she said she was not going to sign over her rights at all. So I basically, explained all of this about this man's child to his face, and he had no idea like who his child even was. And he kept trying to tell the mediator that he was going to get a job, that he was going to, get himself clean, that he was going to do all of these things that he needed to do for the past 3 years, that he hasn't done to get his child back. And the mediator, kind of let him go to see, like let him think about it and see like how his reactions. And then after a while, she basically said to him, these people love your son. These people see your son as their own son, regardless of the fact that the child is a different race, regardless of the fact that the child has a lot of special needs, um, and all of the things that are involved with this child. She basically flat out said to him, well, isn't this something that you should have started thinking about and started making moves 3 years ago for? And he didn't really have an answer for that. And then he kind of sat there and realized, like, okay, maybe I'm not going to be able to do this. Maybe this is too much for me. Um, and he kind of like took a walk and then came back in. And I thought for sure I was going to get told, like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not signing over rights. We'll go to court. We'll do whatever we need to do. And he basically came back in and crying and gave me a hug and said, please take care of my son.
So,
And he signed
okay.
over rights. Then the mediator comes back in and there's a whole bunch of paperwork, and she asks him again, like, do you understand what you're doing? Once you do this, once you sign over rights, you cannot go back and try to fight for rights again. You gave over your rights. That is the same as going to court, having the adoption lawyer or judge take your rights away. And you cannot come back and try to get this child at any point in their life whatsoever. They're also explained that if once a child is 18, they can go into the archives and they can get the information and try to look for their biological parents if they choose to. And, they just make them aware of that. And then he signed the paperwork, and the other person signed the paperwork, and then I had to sign the paperwork, and that was that. But then we still had to go to court for mom to have her rights taken because she wouldn't give up her rights. So it took probably another year after that before we actually had court where the judge took mom's rights, and we were able to move forward and adopt.
So, in the misconceptions, you've alluded to it here about that this can take years.
Yes.
And I'm looking now directly into the lens to the people. But it varies because in our case, I think one of our foster care children was adopted in, I think it was only a year and a half, and I say only, but it shows the length of time. And in another case,
The last one?
it was at least 3 years. It seemed to take during the COVID years. It seemed to take forever with our
No,
final.
all of them, it was at least, I want to say at least 3 years.
Okay.
Even the middle one, who came at 2, it was still almost 3 years.
Yeah, so
but he was at the end of the process when he came through our door, and it still took that amount of time.
Anyway.
Yeah. So what they do when you foster to adopt a child, depending on where they come in, because like I said, in our case, the second child that we adopted, he came in at 2. He was already in a bunch of homes. He was already at the end of the foster to adopt process. And we still had 3 years almost to go through to get him to actually be fully adopted. What they try to tell you is if you're lucky enough to get a baby, which most people do not get, a newborn, but it's usually like a couple months. But if you're able to get a child under 1, what they tell you is they try in that age group to fast track, because they don't want the child to be of an age where they understand that they're adopted, that they had a bio mom or dad and they were taken away from them and all that. And as they get older, they put the pieces together, they hear things, they understand, like, what's a caseworker now, like they start understanding these things because that's their life. And what they tell you is they will try to fast track them and move them forward to adoption quickly so that doesn't happen. But 9 times out of 10, you are looking at probably until 3 or 4, maybe even 5, before the child is actually done with everything and fully adopted. So they are well aware of the full situation, even at that young age.
Yeah, so I think those are some of the misconceptions the people watching may have, and just realize how long this process takes. I know you don't relish talking about it, but you're trying to help other people who are in the foster care system thinking about it and maybe thinking of adopting foster children, and just letting them realize all you have to go through in this process. And I know you wouldn't be talking about it otherwise because you don't like being on camera, um, which
And
which is okay.
there are very few situations, but there is sometimes an option to foster for a short period and then adopt a child. Or um I think in New Jersey, I think the law is that you have to have the child in your home, I want to say, for 6 months, regardless. Like, even if they're already legally free, that meaning their parents signed over rights or the judge took the parents' rights,
uh,
um, they still have to be fostered in your home for 6 months before you can move forward to do the petition to adopt and start the adoption process. So, right there, you're looking at 6 months. It's going to take you probably another at least 6 months to do your case study, all the information that you have to do, um, to get to the point of getting a court date. And then you're probably looking at another 2 to 3 months for a court date. So you're almost at a year and a half if you're lucky to find a child that is legally free, to where you don't have to do the whole going through, the bio parents doing their thing or not doing their thing, or family members coming up and being checked out and all that. And even with that, they tell you that you could probably adopt in like 6 to 8 months. There's no way. There's no way it ever moves that fast.
yeah. Well, thank you. We'll finish this episode here, and we'll talk to you about more things about adoption and other things about the foster care system in future episodes. See you.